Welcome back to the program. If you're just joining us, this is Bottomline Africa right here on KTN News, and we're going to begin our studio discussion shortly. I remember, as Avalia told you, we're trying to make sense out of the foreign affairs policy priorities of the Jubilee government. And of course, we're going to gauge on how President Uhuru Kenyatta performed in his first term in office. So let's first take a look at how the foreign affairs docket looks like at the moment. Remember, some new appointments were made just the other day. The foreign affairs former cabinet secretary is, of course, Amina Mohammed, who has now taken another role as the education CS. She's been replaced by Ambassador Monica Juma, who's been nominated for the same position, and assisted by Ababu Namwamba, who is a former Budalangi Member of Parliament, and he has taken the position of Chief Administrative Officer in that very important docket. Another position that is going to perhaps shape Kenya's foreign policy in future is the East African Community Affairs docket. The former CES is Phyllis Kandie. She's been replaced by the immediate former Meru Governor, Peter Munya. He's been nominated for that position. Of course, is subject to vetting by Parliament on Thursday, I believe. And the Chief Administrative Officer there is Ken Obura. So that is the new look of those two positions that perhaps are going to be very instrumental in shaping up Kenya's foreign policy moving forward. Now, let's take a look at President Uhuru Kenyatta's foreign trips that he made in his first term, and, you know, the policy issues there. And of course, President Kenyatta had a busy international travel schedule during his first time in office, aimed at buttressing his foreign policy. Now, President Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, this is the US president, was the first to tour Kenya. And after his visit back in the year 2014, the tides have been working in favor of President Kenyatta on the global decision-making table, attracting several key leaders to the capital, Nairobi. Among them, the head of states from Israel. Not just Israel, of course, India as well. You can see Modi there. Japan, China, as well as Turkey. Within the period, Kenya has hosted key conferences. We're going to see them shortly on your screens. Of course, that is the Japanese leader. And among the conferences that were hosted right here in Kenya are the WTO, the TICAD, UNCTAD, and most recently, the AGRF. Now, this has further positioned Kenya as a safe, serene, and supreme destination for investors, innovators, and holidaymakers. Additionally, it has brought in billions of dollars in infrastructure funding. Now, in his first year in office, Kenyatta made 28 foreign trips to African and global capitals as part of his game plan to promote his stridently Afrocentric foreign policy, the balance between the East and West to advance Kenya's interest. Now, to date, the number of foreign trips made by the president has reached more than 130 during his first term in office alone. Now, what started off as a Pan-African lobbying against the confirmation of crimes against humanity charges at the ICC morphed into a bold diplomatic onslaught that has repositioned Kenya as the most preferred investment destination in the region. And just a reminder on our Twitter poll earlier, we did ask you, what is your assessment of Kenya's foreign relation under President Uhuru Kenyatta? What is your assessment of Kenya's foreign relations under President Uhuru Kenyatta? Now, let's go straight to a studio discussion. Once again, let me reintroduce our panelists in the studio. We have Abdullahi Boru, who's the Horn of Africa analyst. We also have Nakia White, managing partner, Global Ladder. We also have Professor Mashari Munene, joining me all the way from our City Center studios. He's an international relations lecturer. Good evening, gentlemen and lady. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, Abdullahi, let me begin with you. You've seen those several trips made by President Uhuru Kenyatta in his first time in office. Apparently, there were more than 130, and of course, still counting in his second term. From your own personal point of view, how successful has he been, especially in forging new ties?
I think my starting point is that Kenya has always been a diplomatic powerhouse, whether, you know, during the active days of President Moi or during Kibaki era, where, you know, the president was largely focused on the economy, and that was primarily because when they came into power in 2002.
Abdullah, we're trying to sort out some communication issues here, but let me just pose that question to Professor Mashari Munene, who is at City Center Studio. Of course, Abdullah, I'm going to come back to you shortly. Now, Prof, you've seen those trips that I've just outlined there, more than 130 made by the president. How has this helped, you know, shape Kenya's image out there as far as, you know, Kenya's foreign policy is concerned? Has it helped Kenya to forge much more ties out there?
Were instrumental in positioning Kenya as a power in a changing world, which is going through some realignment, global realignment. We should note that the first 2 years of Uhuru's presidency were actually defensive, given the hostility that the term began with, particularly from the Western powers. He did overcome that. And as a result, you had all those visitors, he himself going to various places. He became an acceptable person in the world. The consequences of that, we saw all those leaders throughout the world coming to Kenya to see this place. And with that, as I think you alluded in your statement, there has been a lot of investment. People finding Kenya to be a very favorable destination for investors,
Yes.
so which might explain some of the mushrooming tall buildings in Nairobi and some other
Yes,
things.
Prof, from your point of view, clearly...
It was a big success.
Yes, clearly it has been a big success, according to you.
It was a big success.
Allow me to bring Nakia into this conversation. Nakia, time and again, when the president was being questioned on whether, you know, he's enjoying a rosy relationship, you know, with the East more than the West, he has time and again said that Kenya neither leans towards East or West. But from the investments, the sheer amount of investments we're witnessing in this country, it seems China is, you know, very much ahead, you know, compared to the US and the UK. I mean, where will this leave these two countries? You know, of course, and by extension, the West.
I'm sorry, I'm just having a bit of a problem hearing you. Can you repeat the last part of that question?
Well, I'm saying basically the president has time and again, you know, alluded, you know, fears that, you know, Kenya is enjoying some sort of a rosy relationship with the East at the expense of, you know, the US and the UK. But from the investment we're seeing in these countries, it seems China has overtaken America by far. So where will this leave the West?
The last part again. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, it seems we have another issue there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just having an issue hearing you.
Okay, now it seems we're having trouble with our communication here. Nakia, let me pose that question once again. Of course, the president has time and again said that, you know, he's not leaning towards the East more compared to the West. But if you look at the sheer amount of investments in Kenya, China is way ahead, you know, compared with the US and the UK. So the question is, where will that leave the West?
Well, I mean, we already see where it's leaving the West. And quite frankly, I think the president has been looking east since 2013, since the ICC case. So, I mean, partly it is one of the reasons, and probably reasonably so in his position, why he's looking east, because I think the West was partly the reason, or a lot of the reason, that he was in court or in the international court. So, I mean, the whole premise behind, you know, even the GDP, we're starting to see a shift from exports that was typically high from the UK. Now China is starting to take over that position. So, I mean, it makes sense in terms of the president's direction. I think given the history of 2013 in the ICC, I mean, People may not agree with that. Certainly, international players in the West may not agree. But I mean, it just seems to be the trend and what makes sense for this president economically.
Now, Abdullah, I believe now you're sorted. And back in the year 2013, apparently America's approach was, let's look for an alternative ally, alternative partner that are going to replace Kenya, perhaps. What changed after that? Because it seems Kenya and the US are now enjoying some sort of a rosy relationship.
Yeah, a few things changed. Number one is it's not very easy to substitute one ally for another. I mean, like, one of the things that we sometimes fail to recognize is Kenya's strategic location in terms of all the humanitarian activities that are conducted from here, be it in South Sudan or also in Somalia. People also need to be reminded that this is the economic artery of the region is the port of Mombasa. For countries that are landlocked like Uganda, Rwanda, and some parts of DRC. So therefore, it's not very easy to just flip a coin and say we are moving in another direction. However, I think we make a great deal of, the breakaway of Kenya, even around during the ICC process, because they knew United States will not come out very clearly and say, look, we are siding with Kenya. Maybe behind the scenes, but at least in terms of all the public statements, they have to say we support the process of the ICC, so we cannot interfere. But also we have to also be reminded that the nature and the nature of engagement between Kenya and China is not necessarily, that of, Kenya facing east now. I think Kenya, I think it's not very clear in their head. I think we are improvising on the go, so we are neither facing east nor west. But I think a more concrete policy approach would be to have a way of enjoying the comparative advantage of looking east, where China doesn't ask a lot of questions when it comes to investment in large-scale infrastructure projects compared to the West, the United States, and at the same time try to benefit from the technological advancement, whereas still retaining democracy, good governance, good practice, and environmental management. So it's trying to create a win-win rather than saying either or.
Well said. Now, Nakia, once again, it seems, of course, once again, China has a lot of investments in Kenya. And bearing in mind the comments that were made just the other day, something that we did talk about in this show, I believe, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago, the comment that were made by President Donald Trump. Do you think with this kind of an attitude, this might give America even much more trouble in trying to forge some sort of ties with a country like Kenya and by extension Africa?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the President of the United States comment and several comments have alienated probably not only the continent of Africa, but many other allies and the fight against terrorism and economics and environmental. So I would not just kind of isolate Kenya and say that he's just offended Kenya. I think unfortunately, the President of the United States has offended a number of countries and a number of allies. And perhaps that is one of the many reasons that added to, one of the reasons that Kenya is starting to look east. But I do have to agree with my fellow colleague, where he said, listen, there needs to be a very kind of succinct and very clear policy in how Kenya is working with both the East and the West, and perhaps there is a win-win situation for working economically and humanitarily with both the East and the West, and we're yet to see that in this country, but hopefully there will be some strong policy moving forward in the future, especially with the new Minister of Foreign Policy.
And talking about Kenya's foreign policy now, Nakia, allow me to engage Professor Macharia. Now, Prof, this is what the President Uhuru Kenyatta, of course, has been saying, and he's saying the most important part of foreign relations for his government is to develop the economic diplomacy with regional partners as well as expand trade in Africa. But we're seeing a lot of problems, especially with the East African community, the mistrust between the member states. I mean, what does this say about Kenya's relationship, for instance, with a country like Tanzania?
First of all, let me point out that I think Kenya's policy has been very clear. I think right from the start, the president made his position clear. It's not so much east or west. It is Kenya's interest. Now, when dealing with Kenya's interest, if it calls for dealing with the Chinese, you deal with the Chinese. If it calls for dealing with the French or the British or the Americans, you deal with them at that level. Not saying that it is east or west. It is Kenya's interest first, and then the rest fit in. As to the region, Kenya is said to be the most powerful economy in the region, being the hub. It influences the rest in big ways. And the others also realize that. If you notice, somehow Kenya tries to bend backwards in order to accommodate the wishes and the concerns of its neighbors. For one, it considers its neighbors a priority, because anything that happens in Uganda or Tanzania or Rwanda or South Sudan and Somalia and Ethiopia directly affects Kenya. That's why it places a lot of emphasis on the region or the neighborhood to ensure that things do not go wrong. Sometimes there is a disagreement, and some disagreements are petty, but that have not meant that the relations break at all. That is not what it comes to.
Yes,
and the emphasis that kept on being put on the development of the East African community, despite the challenges that the community faces, is an indication of that concern. Associated with that is the Pan-Africanist agenda. And once you have the Pan-Africanist agenda, then it is possible to deal with the rest of the world from a perspective of African strength, as opposed to the strength or the perspective of others. So it is the others to fit into the Kenyan agenda, and not Kenya to fit into other people's agenda.
Well said, Prof. And let me just pose this question to Abdullah as well. And I'd like to hear your view. Talk us through about this apparent, diplomatic squabble between Kenya and Tanzania. Apparently, Kenyan traders have been mistreated time and again by Tanzanian immigration. And of course, there has been some sort of series of trade and diplomatic squabbles with TZ. I mean, what does this say about the relationship of these two countries?
I think one of the things that we need to remember, the person who feels the most is the late Tanzanian President Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, with his extremely expansive Pan-African mindset. But I think since he's left, I think Tanzanians, whether it's at a government level or even the general public, there is a tendency to be a bit inward-looking. And part of it is, the residual disagreement following the collapse of East African community has not been dealt with very well. For most of the Tanzanians, and possibly even our neighbors, Uganda, there is a fair sense that Kenya got disproportionate benefit from the East African community, whether it be the airlines and even parts of the railway which were part of the East African community that the Ugandans and Tanzanians are not very happy. But this has to be dealt with at both the leadership level, that is the presidential, but also the ministers, because it hurts when, countries that Kenya has, tried to accommodate. I mean, like, if you remember the East African common market, Kenya zero-rated most of the goods that were coming from Uganda and Tanzania to ensure that the ball keeps rolling. But I think there is a sense that, for the Tanzanians, sisi hatuna ustaarabu. So that tends to be rubbed on, and when most Kenyans go and work in Tanzania, it becomes very difficult. But that has become fairly exacerbated since the arrival of the President John Pombe Magufuli. But I think there is a need for Kenya to probably consider looking, into countries like Ethiopia without necessarily abandoning the East African project, but also look at countries like, Ethiopia. Yes, it's not an open economy like the two other countries, but we are talking about 100 million people. That's a good market that can act as a counterweight.
Prof, according to Abdullah, this is not a problem that has began just the other day. It seems the squabbles between Tanzania and Kenya, diplomatically speaking, started a long time ago.
That is true. We also have to look at the colonial experiences The two, although they were under the British for some time, the Tanzanians also had German experience. And sometimes they are split between the Germans and the English in terms of the colonial baggage. Yes, there had been those differences. In the 1960s and 70s, we developed ideological differences as to who was more socialistic than the other. In Kenya, we had African socialism, which was essentially capitalism. Tanzania tried a more serious version of socialism with Ujamaa, and it had its own problems. So we had those small ideological differences. But at the summit level, it did appear as if both President Jomo Kenyatta and President Julius Nyerere, they worked very hard as individuals to ensure that things don't deteriorate to a point where you are calling each other names, although we did call each other's names. Now, the mistake that the community made, or the leaders made, there were other reasons, but the collapse of the original community was a big mistake which was realized much later, about 10 years later, and that's why it was revived. And in the revival, there was effort to ensure that the mistakes that were made in the first time, in the first instance, will not be repeated. And of course, what we've seen is that it is surviving more and expanding. We have more countries in it than before, and there are more trying to come in. So there is something going on. What Kenya seems to have done to realize its power is to be magnanimous with the rest, so that it should not be blamed for the collapse of the community when it is doing its best. It is one country that pays its dues fully, all the time. Of course, Rwanda also does it in the same way.
Of course, Prof. Let's
why does it do that?
Yes, Prof. Let's be optimistic that things are going to be well between these two countries. Now, Nakia, when President Uhuru Kenyatta says that the most important part of foreign relations for his government is to develop economic diplomacy with regional partners as well as expand trade in Africa, how does the West interpret this?
So we saw it in both of President Uhuru's speeches. One was during his inauguration, and the other was Jamhuri Day. And during both of those speeches, he talked about building stronger ties and relationships within the African continent, particularly with his East African partners. And I think that Africa is certainly a rich enough continent where you can look at your partners and start to develop really good relationships, both economically, humanitarily, and resource-wise, so that you don't have to have the strong dependency that many of the African countries have had over the last couple of years on the West. I think that there's enough resources and power within Africa to build Africa's own humanitarian efforts and all of the other necessities that the continent might need. So for President Uhuru Kenyatta to talk about this during both of his speeches, I think is absolutely brilliant, and certainly speaks to his intelligence when it comes to thinking about the growth not only of his country, of East Africa, and certainly of all of Africa.
Now, Abdullah, I'm sure you'll agree with me that this position, the foreign affairs portfolio in Kenya has been occupied by very powerful, individuals in this country. Now that we're seeing some sort of a new face in this docket, not just the foreign affairs as well as the East African community affairs docket. Now, with this new team, do you believe that Kenya's foreign policy might get some sort of a boost?
Well, listen, I'm not sure who you
Actually, I posed that question to Abdullah. Sorry, Nakia.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's all righty. I think one of the things that the president needs to do is to match his rhetoric with his action. The appointment of Ambassador Monica Juma is a step in the right direction. But I think now it's about ensuring that whatever, for the first time, credit to the former Foreign Affairs Minister, we have a foreign policy document out. So I think the team is good, but the test is in the pudding. I think Ambassador Monica Juma and her team needs to move very quickly and put, the president's words, and vision, as well as their own vision, because she's in her own right an incredibly qualified and competent CS once she gets the approval from the parliament, to actualize this and put the speed in motion. Unlike the first time when, almost half of it, the former minister had to try and extricate both the president and the deputy from the ICC, where they are, for most part, on the defense. Now they need to go on offense and be able to realize the potential for the country.
Well, Abdullah, allow me to give out some breaking news here for our viewers. But before that, let me engage the Prof as we try to piece together some crucial information with regards to that breaking news. Now, Prof, with the new face, the foreign docket, of course, she replaces Amina Mohammed, who, actually, I'm told the breaking news is ready with us right now, and we're getting reports that the self-proclaimed NRM General, Miguna, who has been very vocal, especially after the swearing in of Raila Odinga, has been deported. News reaching us is that the self-proclaimed NRM General, Miguna, has been deported. And right now, we have his lead counsel, that is lawyer Nelson Harvey, with us on phone. Now, Wakili, good evening. Can you please, first of all, confirm for us that this is exactly happening?
Good evening. We've just left court about 1.5 hours ago. All attempts to trace Miguna had been futile, despite a court order that he be availed in court. Mm-hmm. Now, the last information we had was that Miguna had been taken to Mombasa Road at the police station near the airport, where ordinarily people are kept pending deportation. Now, we are reliably informed that he has been put on a KLM flight, which is already on the runway, and is being allegedly deported to Canada. This defeats logic because Miguna is a Kenyan because Kenya is another country.
So, Wakili, can you perhaps tell us his whereabouts? Because it was not very clear. Initially we were told he was in Kajiado at some point. He was taken to Githunguri, I believe. And up until today, I believe you people have been waiting him at the Milimani Law Court. So can you perhaps tell us his whereabouts?
At 2:30, Miguna was at the Kajiado Law Court before Honorable Magistrate Edwin Mulochi, before whom the police had decided to take him there and force him to take a plea, notwithstanding an order by the High Court that he be brought before the High Court in Milimani. Now, our lawyers in Kajiado brought these facts to the attention of the court, whereupon the magistrate decided and directed that Miguna be brought to Nairobi by 3:30. Now, at around 4 p.m., when the judge came back to court to confirm whether or not Miguna had been brought, we were informed by a police officer that Miguna was in the court vicinity. Then the judge directed that if at all he has been brought to court, then he ought to be released immediately. Thereafter, the police engaged us in a cat-and-mouse game for almost 2 hours, running in the basement and various corridors of the court, but we couldn't trace Miguna. Eventually, we went to the court, and the court indicated that if that be the case, then it will make a penultimate order that any proceedings whatsoever originated in the Republic of Kenya against Miguna are suspended indefinitely until such a time as is brought to court in any event before 11 a.m. tomorrow. And look, deportation is in the nature of proceedings. So if the government of the Republic of Kenya is undertaking the deportation of Miguna, that is a clear contravention of the order that was issued by Justice Kemaru at around 7 p.m. this evening.
Well, and Lawyer Harvey, I would like to know this, because this is a man who has a dual citizenship, both of Canada and Kenya. Now that he apparently has been deported, I mean, as part of his legal team, what is your next plan of action?
We will still appear before court tomorrow at 11 to get confirmation as to why the police have decided to disobey this court order. And I've given an order to all lawyers within Nairobi and any environs who can be able to attend court to come to court tomorrow at 11. Thereafter, we'll make a procession from Milimani Law Court. We'll walk down Kenyatta Avenue up to the Supreme Court and petition the Chief Justice to respond to this matter. because we cannot have a situation whereby orders are being given by the court and the executive does not want to obey the court orders. Thereafter, we'll move from the Chief Justice's offices to the office of Inspector General Boynet and also petition him on this matter.
Apparently, Wakili, report reaching us that is that Miguna Miguna is on board a KLM airline from JKIA. Perhaps can you confirm that for us?
I've received similar information from reliable sources at the airport and also from Miguna Miguna's family who have been following up this matter carefully.
And apparently, he's not the only one whose passport was revoked. There are also other individuals, you know, key NASA figures whose passport were also revoked. I mean, where will that leave them as well?
Look, this is an exercise in futility because the right to bear and carry a passport is a constitutional right for any Kenyan. The government cannot revoke the passport at will unless somebody has been declared an alien. We are made to understand that about 14 leaders and members of the NASA coalition have been given notice that their passport stands suspended and they ought to return it to the Immigration Department within 21 days from now. Again, that's another illegality. We will be going back to court to seek to quash the decision by the government purporting to revoke this passport.
Thank you, Harvey. Of course, that is lawyer Nelson Harvey representing Miguna Miguna, and reports reaching us now is that self-proclaimed NRM General Miguna Miguna has been deported, and we're getting reports that he is at this moment on board a KLM airline from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Of course, today the police failed to produce him in court. He's been being shuttled from one police station or police cell to another since, he was arrested. He was transferred from Githuguri to Kajiado, back to Nairobi. And right now, once again, report reaching us is that the self-proclaimed NASA or NRM General, Miguna Miguna, has been deported. Remember, this is a man who has dual citizenship, both of Canada and Kenya. And according to his lawyer, the information they are getting as well is that he is on board a KLM airline from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Of course, this is a story that we're still keenly following for you, and definitely we're going to give you a detailed information with regards to this developing story in our subsequent bulletins, of course, from tomorrow morning. Of course, that breaking news has disrupted our program briefly, but that brings us to the end of our program tonight. Thank you very much to our panelists, including Abdullahi Boru, the Horn of Africa analyst, Nakia White, managing partner, Global Lad, as well as Professor Macharia Munene, who's an international relations lecturer. But for now, before we wrap up, let me leave you with our proverb of the day.